Have you ever looked around at the world today, maybe after scrolling through the news for 10 minutes, and just thought to yourself, wow, this is absolutely the most incredible, technologically advanced time to be alive?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Right. But then simultaneously you think, well, everything is also completely falling apart. You get this feeling of being caught in an era of extreme, almost whiplash-inducing contradictions.
It is definitely a very specific kind of societal vertigo, I think.
Exactly. Well, if you feel that way, you are absolutely not alone. Because over a century and a half ago, a writer sat down and captured that exact dizzying feeling.
And he did it perfectly.
He really did. He captured it in what is arguably the most famous opening line in the entire English literary canon.
Yeah.
You know the one. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
I mean, it's a line that echoes through history for a reason. It captures that fundamental tension of literally any society hovering right on the brink of massive, irreversible change.
And that tension is exactly what we are dissecting today. We're taking a really comprehensive journey into the foundational chapters. So that's book 1, chapters 1 through 6 of Charles Dickens' monumental 1859 historical novel, A Tale of Two Cities.
But, we aren't just here to summarize a plot for you.
No, definitely not. We are going to deconstruct the massive historical backdrop, the intricate plot structures, and really dig into the profound, heavy themes here.
Themes like deep-seated secrecy, social injustice, and resurrection.
Right, literally the concept of being, as the book says, recalled to life.
Which is such a powerful phrase. But to do that effectively, we have to look past the carriage rides and the hidden rooms. We have to understand the underlying architecture of the text itself.
So we're exploring London and Paris, specifically in the period of 1775, kind of stretching out toward the terror of 1793.
Exactly. And Dickens didn't just pick those years at random. He constructed this entire world using deeply researched historical realities to really fuel a narrative of immense psychological and societal tension.
So let's start with the meta-context. Basically, the actual environment in which this story was born. The year is 1859, when the public first gets their hands on this thing.
Right.
But it wasn't dropped as a massive hardcover book on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Tell me about the delivery mechanism, because understanding how people actually read this, I think, completely changes how we understand its pacing.
Oh, the delivery mechanism was everything. I mean, the novel was initially published in weekly installments.
Weekly?
Yeah, every single week in Dickens' own literary magazine, which was called All the Year Round. So this serialization ran from April all the way to November of 1859.
Wow.
It wasn't until much later that year that his publishers, Chapman and Hall, actually issued it as a single-bound book.
That is fascinating.
And it's worth noting, this was a massive departure for him. It's only his second historical novel. His first was Barnaby Rudge, which he wrote much earlier in his career.
So, okay, let's unpack this. The serialization aspect completely reframes the narrative for me. Dickens was fundamentally operating as like a 19th century showrunner.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Right. Think about modern streaming culture. A platform drops one highly anticipated episode of a massive drama every Sunday night. They do it to build societal tension.
They want to dominate the cultural conversation for months.
Exactly. To get everyone talking at the proverbial water cooler, that is the exact mechanism Dickens was utilizing here. But he wasn't just doing it for the art, was he?
Well, no, he was doing it for the economics. He had a magazine to sell. He had to keep the reading public agitated and desperate for the next installment.
So how did that physical reality of weekly deadlines alter the way he actually constructed these early chapters?
It forced this relentless, almost aggressive forward momentum. I mean, when you are publishing weekly, you just do not have the luxury of 100 pages of slow, meandering exposition.
Right. People would just stop buying the magazine.
Exactly. Every installment has to earn its keep. It has to hook the reader, deliver a substantive piece of the puzzle, and end on a note that practically guarantees you will go out and purchase the magazine the following week.
Which explains why the pacing of these first 6 chapters is so incredibly fast.
It is entirely fascinating. He starts with this sweeping, almost cinematic wide shot of 2 whole nations, and then within pages, he just snaps the lens down to a claustrophobic, terrifying micro level.
Let's talk about that wide shot for a second. So he sets the story in 1775, but he's writing it in 1859. The contradictions he lays out in that famous opening paragraph, the age of wisdom and foolishness, the epoch of belief and incredulity.
The season of light and darkness.
Yes, exactly. He's talking about 1775, but he's really holding up a mirror to his own Victorian readers, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Victorian era was defined by rapid industrialization, incredible technological advancement, and immense wealth.
But there was a dark side.
A huge dark side. It was also defined by horrific urban poverty, disease, and just staggering social inequality. Dickens is using the powder keg of 1775 France and England as a very loud warning bell for 1859 Britain.
So what did 1775 England actually look like in this context?
Well, he looks back at England in 1775 and paints a picture of a society that is gripping onto order through sheer brutality. The justice system was totally draconian.
Like handing out capital punishment for really minor things, right?
Yes, for the most petty crimes imaginable. And the public was simultaneously celebrating the Enlightenment while being completely obsessed with wild superstitions.
Right. The sources mentioned the Cock Lane ghost.
Yeah, that was a massive paranormal phenomenon involving this supposedly haunted apartment in London. It completely gripped the city.
Which really proves how easily a supposedly rational public could devolve into irrational hysteria.
Exactly. And politically, the ground is completely shifting beneath their feet. King George III is sitting on the throne in England, receiving these increasingly tense, rebellious messages from the British colonies in America.
Right, because it's 1775. The modern reader, both in 1859 and today, knows exactly what happens next.
The explosive 1776 push for American independence.
Dickens is basically showing us an empire that thinks it's completely stable, but is actually fraying at the edges.
And if you look across the English Channel to France in 1775, the picture is infinitely more volatile.
How so?
The aristocracy in France is marked by this grotesque, insulated hoarding of wealth. I mean, they are living in absolute performative luxury.
Totally disconnected from the rest of the country.
Completely disconnected from the extreme violence and the crushing, desperate poverty that is simmering among the lower classes. The tension isn't just palpable, it's structural.
It's a society mathematically accelerating toward the era of the guillotine. But Dickens didn't just invent that historical atmosphere from scratch.
No, not at all. He was leaning heavily on the work of his close friend, the historian Thomas Carlyle. Specifically, Carlyle's monumental 1837 book, The French Revolution, A History.
But from what I understand from our deep dive materials, Carlyle didn't just provide the dry facts. He provided the stylistic adrenaline for the novel.
Adrenaline is a great word for it. Carlyle's history is famous for reading almost like a fever dream. It's written in the present tense, it's highly emotional, and it views history not as a list of dates, but as this violent, churning clash of human passions.
And Dickens just absorbed that chaotic energy.
He did, but he paired that massive historical scope with a very intimate emotional core, which he actually drew from his own personal life.
Right, I wanted to bring this up. Just before writing the novel, Dickens actually acted in a play written by his friend Wilkie Collins called The Frozen Deep.
And that wasn't just a casual hobby for him. That play deeply affected his state of mind.
It's a story of profound self-sacrifice and deep emotional turmoil.
Yes, yes. Acting out those intense personal dramas on stage really planted the seeds for the character dynamics in A Tale of Two Cities.
So he basically takes the massive geopolitical chaos of Carlyle and injects it with the intimate, agonizing personal sacrifices of Collins' theater.
Which creates just a brilliant architectural setup for the book. He establishes two entire nations on the brink of absolute disaster. Two kings, two societies, massive shifts.
And then, abruptly, after setting that huge stage, he just cuts the lights.
He really does. He takes us from the macro right down to the microscopic. We are suddenly plunged into a tiny, incredibly muddy, dark, and deeply paranoid moment.
It's a Friday night in late November of 1775.
Yes, and that transition from the macro to the micro is staggering.
We find ourselves out on the Dover Road. A mail coach is attempting to travel from London to the coast, and the conditions are just nothing short of miserable.
The atmosphere is thick with this heavy, suffocating mist. The road goes up a steep hill, and the mud is just so thick.
The carriage is heavily laden, and the horses simply cannot pull it.
Right, so the driver, the guard, and the three passengers have actually had to get out of the coach. They are walking alongside it in the freezing mud just to help the exhausted animals make it up this incline.
You really have to understand the reality of travel in 18th century England to grasp the tension here. This wasn't a leisurely ride in the countryside.
Oh, not at all. It was physically punishing. And more importantly, it was incredibly dangerous.
The roads were largely unpoliced, right?
Largely unpoliced, and highway robbery was just completely rampant. To be out on the Dover Road in the freezing fog in the middle of the night was to be in a state of extreme vulnerability.
The paranoia is absolute. And then suddenly the sound of a galloping horse cuts through the mist.
A single rider emerges from the dark.
And immediately, panic sets in among everyone associated with the coach. The passengers and the guard, they don't wait to ask questions. They all instantly assume this rider is a highwayman coming to rob them or kill them.
The guard readies his blunderbuss. The passengers are reaching into their coats for hidden weapons.
They are basically ready to commit murder just to protect themselves.
Exactly. And this is a perfect microcosm of the societal paranoia Dickens just described in the previous chapter. Trust is entirely non-existent. Everyone assumes the absolute worst of their fellow man.
But the rider isn't a robber. It's a man named Jerry Cruncher.
Right, he's an odd job man. Essentially a rough-around-the-edges courier dispatched from Tellson's bank back in London.
And he is desperately looking for one specific passenger who is trudging through the mud out there. Mr. Jarvis Lorry.
Who is a 6-year-old, very proper, very established banker.
And when Jerry finally identifies Mr. Lorry in the dark, he hands him a message. But the message isn't, a detailed dispatch or a sealed letter explaining a complex situation.
No, it's just a tiny cryptic fragment. It just says, "Wait at Dover for Mamselle."
And Mr. Lorry reads this, and he gives Jerry Cruncher a reply to take all the way back to the bank in London. The reply is literally just 3 words.
Recall to life.
Recall to life. And Jerry Cruncher is left standing in the mist, utterly bewildered. Now, wait, I have to push back on the logic of this scene a little bit.
Okay, what's the issue?
Well, if secrecy is so incredibly paramount to this mission, isn't sending a vague, creepy message like recalled to life via a rough, muddy courier who works for a highly public bank actually drawing more attention to the situation?
That's a fair point.
Right. Like, why not just write a sealed, coded letter? Why all the melodramatic spy talk?
It's a really great question, and I think it speaks to the difference between modern digital cryptography and 18th century plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability. How so?
Well, in an era where mail coaches are routinely robbed by highwaymen and where letters are frequently intercepted and read by government agents looking for treason, a sealed letter containing detailed instructions is a massive liability.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, if a highwayman steals a letter explaining that a British banker is crossing the channel to extract a political prisoner who has been secretly held in Paris for 18 years.
That highwayman suddenly has unparalleled blackmail material.
Exactly. By using verbal codes that sound like absolute nonsense to anyone outside the loop, Lorry and Tellson's bank are actually protecting themselves.
So, Mamselle is just a generic French term used here as a code name.
Yes, to protect the identity of the novel's heroine, Lucy Manette.
And recall to life acts as, like, the confirmation receipt. It tells the bank that Lorry understands the gravity of the mission without putting a single incriminating detail into writing.
Precisely. And it's also the title of Book 1, which establishes the central driving theme of the entire first section of the novel. Resurrection, but not in a supernatural, zombies rising from the grave sense.
Right, it's the idea of someone who has been dead to the world, buried away in an institution, being suddenly and shockingly brought back into the realm of the living.
But notice the psychological effect of that code. It serves its operational purpose, but it completely shatters Mr. Lorry's composure.
It really does. The phrase doesn't just confuse Jerry Cruncher. It triggers a profound psychological spiral for Lorry himself as he climbs back into that dark, cold carriage to continue the journey.
He is a man of spreadsheets, ledgers and predictable outcomes, and he is now dealing with the messy, unpredictable trauma of bringing a dead man back to life.
The physical paranoia outside the carriage is intense, but what really fascinates me is how Dickens seamlessly moves that terror inside the carriage straight into Lorry's actual subconscious.
Yes, as we move into the chapter titled The Night Shadows.
Right, and the narrator delivers this vital, deeply philosophical observation. I actually have the quote here, a wonderful fact to reflect upon, that every human creature is constituted to be that profound secret and mystery to every other.
It is such a beautiful, haunting line.
It really is. I mean, think about the person sitting next to you on your morning commute right now. Outwardly, they are just a stranger drinking coffee.
Right.
Inwardly, in their minds, they might be carrying a secret that alters the course of their entire family's history. We can see their exterior, their coat, their posture, but we can never truly know the memories, the traumas, or the ghosts they're carrying around inside their heads.
Dickens is tapping into almost a pre-Freudian understanding of the subconscious here. He was keenly aware of the psychological isolation of modern urban life.
You can be surrounded by millions of people in a city like London.
Or squeezed into a tiny carriage with 2 other passengers and still be completely, terrifyingly alone with your own mind.
So Laurie is sitting in the carriage alongside these two strangers. He is dozing, slipping in and out of a restless sleep.
And on the surface, his mind tries to retreat to the safety of his mundane, everyday work at Tellson's bank. He dreams of strong boxes and vaults.
But an unstoppable current of thought continuously intrudes on his rest. He is absolutely haunted by the mission.
The imagery of his dream state is just so gothic and visceral. In his mind, he imagines that he is literally digging someone out of a grave.
A man who has been buried alive for nearly 18 years.
Yes. And Laurie's having an actual conversation with the specter, the ghost of this buried man. He is digging away the dirt, looking at this gaunt, ruined face, and telling the ghost that he has been recalled to life.
And Laurie asks the ghost these agonizing questions.
Right.
Do you care to live? Do you want to see her?
The psychological variance of the ghost's imaginary reactions is really the key to understanding Laurie's own internal panic here.
What do you mean by variance?
While Laurie's anxiety is projecting these responses, sometimes in the dream, the ghost weeps and begs to see her immediately, just desperate for connection.
Okay.
But other times, the ghost shrinks back in absolute terror, fearing that the shock of seeing her after 18 years of total darkness would literally kill him on the spot.
So Laurie's terrified because he has no idea what happens when you open a psychological tomb.
Exactly. What condition will the mind be in? Will the light cure him or destroy him?
It's an incredible piece of narrative architecture. I mean, Dickens introduces the massive, heavy backstory of Dr. Manette purely through the psychological anxiety of Mr. Laurie.
We haven't even met the doctor yet.
We haven't met the daughter either. But we know, just from Laurie's terrified dreams, that a man has been essentially erased from the world for 18 years.
And Laurie is terrified of the emotional consequences, the sheer explosive trauma of trying to bring him back into the light.
The physical journey through the mud perfectly mirrors the difficult, murky, psychological journey Laurie's undertaking.
He is a man who values control, and he is stepping into a situation where control is completely impossible.
Which is exactly why, when the carriage finally makes it to Dover the next morning, Laurie's first instinct is to aggressively reassert his corporate identity.
Yes, the sun is up, the mist has burned off. Mr. Laurie is at the Royal George Hotel.
He sheds all those heavy, muddy travel clothes. He gets cleaned up, puts on his crisp suit, and appears exactly as he wishes to be seen. A well-dressed, 60-year-old man of business.
He is desperately trying to put the armor of his profession back on before his meeting.
Because he needs that armor.
Yeah.
Later that afternoon, the mamselle from the cryptic message arrives from London.
This is Lucy Manette.
Right. She's described so vividly. A short, slight, pretty young woman with a remarkably radiant head of golden hair.
She really embodies the Victorian ideal of innocence. And the tragedy of this scene is rooted entirely in dramatic irony.
Right, because we, the readers, know what Laurie's terrifying dream was about.
Why?
We know about the man buried alive for 18 years.
But Lucy is completely in the dark.
She walks into that hotel room believing that Tellson's bank has summoned her all the way to Dover regarding some small, mundane piece of property, or an administrative detail regarding her inheritance.
She states, as a matter of fact, that her father has been dead for a very long time.
She has grown up an orphan, she is grieved, she is healed, and she has built her entire identity around that loss. She thinks she's sitting down with a banker to go over a ledger.
This is where we witness a really profound collision between corporate detachment and human devastation.
Laurie desperately struggles to maintain his rigid composure, doesn't he?
He does. He repeatedly insists that he is just a machine, a man of business simply delivering a factual update. He tries to distance himself from the emotional fallout.
But the sheer human weight of the truth he holds forces him to break character. He cannot just hand her a piece of paper. He has to systematically dismantle her entire reality.
He sits this young woman down and has to explain that her father, Alexander Manette, a once highly respected doctor, did not die when she was a baby.
Instead, he was secretly imprisoned, locked away in a foreign country for 18 years, without trial, without contact, without a name.
He is alive. He has just been found in Paris, living hidden in the dark garret of an old servant's house.
And the kicker here, the really heavy part, she, this young woman who has never known him, who has no memory of his face, is the one tasked with going across the sea to save him.
Laurie tells her they must travel to Paris immediately to identify him, and that it is her duty to restore him to life with love and care.
The shock is, understandably, too much for the human nervous system to process. The reality of 18 years of a stolen life, the sudden resurrection of a father she thought was in the grave, it just crashes down on her.
Lucy goes into physical shock and faints dead away in the hotel room. It is a very real physiological response to incomprehensible trauma.
And instantly, the sterile atmosphere of the hotel room is shattered. The door flies open, and in rushes Miss Pross.
Ah, Miss Pross.
She is Lucy's fiercely protective, incredibly devoted servant. And what I love about Miss Pross is that she is completely unconcerned with Laurie's status as a respectable, wealthy banker.
Oh, she couldn't care less.
She physically pushes him out of the way, berates him for upsetting her ladybird, and fiercely cares for the unconscious Lucy. It's this sudden, chaotic burst of raw, protective love.
Miss Pross is a vital character to introduce at this exact moment. She represents fierce, almost irrational loyalty.
She is unapologetically British, highly insular, and fiercely protective of her small domestic sphere.
Her chaotic maternal love contrasts sharply with the cold calculations of Tellson's bank, but more importantly, it acts as a foil to the violent ideological passions of the French revolutionaries we are about to meet.
Because, to rescue Dr. Manette, Laurie and Lucy cannot stay in the safety of the Royal George Hotel.
No, they have to cross the English Channel.
They must step directly into a world that is a powder keg waiting for a single spark. They must enter Saint Antoine, the poorest, most desperate suburb of Paris.
And that transition plunges us into one of the most visceral, famous scenes in all of literature.
We leave the crisp coastal air of Dover and are dropped into the dirty, crowded, fiercely impoverished streets of Saint Antoine.
A large cask of red wine is being transported down the street, and it falls. It smashes open on the rough paving stones, and the red wine flows everywhere, pooling in the muddy, filthy street.
The reaction of the people is what makes the scene so horrifying and so historically resonant. The people of Saint Antoine do not just mourn the loss of the wine.
They swarm it. They swarm it with the desperation of starving animals.
Men fall to their knees in the mud, cupping their hands to scoop up the filthy mixture of wine and dirt, desperate for the calories.
Women tear off their handkerchiefs, soak up the red liquid from the cobblestones, and then wring those dirty rags directly into the mouths of their crying babies.
It is a display of sheer survival instinct, stripped of all human dignity. It is incredibly vivid. You can see the red staining their hands, their faces, their teeth.
And the imagery is blindingly obvious. The spilled red wine on the cobblestones is a massive metaphor for the blood that will soon be spilled during the French Revolution.
In fact, Dickens pushes it even further. One man in the crowd literally dips his finger into the muddy wine and scrawls the word blood across a nearby wall.
It's a very striking moment.
Now, I have to ask you, as an analyst of this text, isn't that a bit heavy-handed? Does Dickens not trust his reader to get the metaphor? Writing blood on the wall feels almost like bad, cheesy melodrama. Is he spoon-feeding us the themes here?
It's a very fair critique from a modern literary perspective where we really value subtlety, but we have to view this through the lens of Victorian serialization and Dickens' roots in the theater.
Okay.
He isn't writing a quiet, introspective novel for a university seminar. He is writing a weekly thriller for the masses. Melodrama in the 19th century sense wasn't a dirty word.
It was a tool.
Exactly, a highly effective tool for communicating massive structural truths to a broad audience instantly. He needs the reader sitting in their parlor in London to feel the visceral threat of the French Revolution in their bones.
So writing blood on the wall isn't just a metaphor, it's a historical prophecy.
And it grounds the socio-political commentary perfectly. The aristocracy's excessive spending, which Dickens mocked in the opening chapter, has a direct physical cost.
The hoarding of wealth, the oppressive taxation systems like the tail and the salt tax have resulted in a populace so starved they will lick mud for a drop of wine.
This isn't just poverty, it's systemic degradation.
And standing in the center of this chaos, calmly watching the desperation, are the owners of the wine shop, Monsieur Defarge and Madame Defarge.
They are a chilling, fascinating pair. Monsieur Defarge is described as a strong, formidable 30-year-old man. He is clearly a leader in the community, someone with authority and suppressed rage.
But it's Madame Defarge who truly commands the space, isn't it?
Oh, undoubtedly. She sits inside the shop, silently knitting. She barely speaks, but her silence is incredibly active.
She is intensely watchful. She is cataloging the faces, the desperation, the events unfolding around her. She feels mythological, almost like one of the Greek fates weaving the threads of human destiny.
Exactly. Dickens is drawing on the historical reality of the trichotises, the women who would later sit and knit at the foot of the guillotine during the Reign of Terror.
Her knitting isn't a hobby, it is a ledger.
She is encoding a hit list of the aristocracy into her stitches. She is the silent witness who is preparing to become the ultimate judge.
As Laurie and Lucy carefully navigate their way into the shop, looking for the old servant who is hiding Dr. Manette, Defarge is speaking with three familiar customers.
And they all call each other by the exact same name, Jacques.
Now, this isn't a coincidence. Jacques is a code name. It is a moniker used by the revolutionaries to identify one another safely, a nod to the historical Jacquerie peasant revolts.
It signifies that this wine shop is not just a place to buy cheap alcohol, it is the absolute epicenter of the brewing underground rebellion.
Defarge is a master of this environment. He pretends not to notice Mr. Laurie and Lucy at first, maintaining his cover in front of the crowd.
But eventually, after a brief, coded exchange confirming their identities, he leads them away from the shop floor.
They go out into a courtyard and begin to climb. They go up these incredibly steep, dark, dangerous stairs, moving further and further away from the light until they reach a tiny, isolated fifth-floor room.
But before Defarge opens the door for Laurie and Lucy, he does something deeply unsettling.
He allows those three men, the three Jacques from the bar, to look through small chinks in the wall to spy on the broken man inside the room. I struggle with Laurie's and Defarge's actions here. Defarge was Dr. Manette's old servant. He took the broken man in when the prison finally released him. Yet, he is treating him like an exhibit.
Like a museum piece.
Exactly. He is using the doctor as a prop, a museum piece of aristocratic cruelty, letting chosen revolutionaries peek through the wall at the ruined man. Why?
Because to Defarge, Dr. Manette's individual humanity is completely secondary to his political utility.
Wow.
Yeah. Defarge is using the doctor's trauma to stoke the fire of the revolution. He is showing these men the physical, shattered evidence of what the elites do to anyone who crosses them.
Dr. Manette in that room is no longer just a man who needs a doctor. To the Jacques, he is a living, breathing symbol of the tyranny of the ruling class.
Defarge is weaponizing the trauma to guarantee that when the time comes, these men will spill blood without hesitation.
It is a dark political exploitation of suffering. And finally, after climbing those dark stairs and witnessing that exploitation, the moment of truth arrives.
Defarge unlocks the door. We finally come face to face with a man who has been buried alive for 18 years.
The scene inside the garret is profoundly claustrophobic and tragic. Inside this tiny room, with its back to the door, sits a man with entirely white hair, looking unimaginably older than his actual years.
He is physically frail, almost translucent.
But the physical decay is nothing compared to the psychological ruin. He is sitting on a low bench, busily, obsessively making a lady's shoe.
And he notes with a heartbreaking earnestness that he is making it in the present fashion.
Despite the fact that he's been locked in a lightless dungeon and hasn't actually seen a fashionable lady's shoe in nearly 2 decades.
Right. Laurie approaches him and gently asks him his name, desperately hoping for a spark of recognition. He wants to hear the proud name, Alexander Manette.
But the man doesn't give his name. He looks up and replies in this hollow, flat voice, 105 North Tower.
That's it. That was his cell number in the Bastille prison. He's been stripped of his humanity for so long that he genuinely believes he is a location, a number in a ledger.
This is where we have to dive into the specific history of the Bastille. It wasn't just a prison for common criminals, was it?
No, it was a fortress used by the French elites to silently disappear political enemies, writers, and anyone who inconvenienced the aristocracy.
Often through lettres de cachet, essentially blank arrest warrants signed by the king.
You could be locked away forever without a trial, without a public record, simply because a powerful person wanted you gone. 18 years of solitary confinement in that environment will systematically dismantle the human ego.
But why shoes? Of all the things a mind could latch onto in the dark, why has he dedicated his entire existence, his entire remaining mental capacity to making women's shoes?
It is a classic documented response to profound trauma and sensory deprivation.
Really?
Yes. When the mind is deprived of all external stimuli, no light, no conversation, no changing seasons, it begins to consume itself.
That is terrifying.
To prevent a total descent into madness, the brain latches onto repetitive mechanical tasks. Making shoes, the precise rhythmic task of punching leather, stitching thread, shaping the heel, it gave him a focal point.
It was a micro-universe where he had a tiny sliver of control in a world where he had absolutely none.
He didn't just learn a trade, he traded his identity to survive. The brilliant doctor died, and the mindless shoemaker survived in his place.
It is harrowing to witness. And then, Lucy slowly approaches him. He is terrified of her at first, shrinking back from human contact. But then he notices her hair,
She has this radiant, vibrant goldy hair that catches the little light in the room.
and the doctor's reaction is incredible. He reaches to his neck and he pulls out a tiny, filthy rag that he has worn against his skin for 18 years.
Inside this rag are a few strands of golden hair.
He had begged his jailers to let him keep this hair on his very first day of imprisonment. It was a physical connection to his wife, a talisman to help him escape his stone cell in spirit.
It is the literal and metaphorical golden thread tethering him to his lost humanity. Because of the trauma and the complete distortion of time in his mind, he initially mistakes the young Lucy for his wife.
He thinks the past has somehow returned, that the 18 years were just a nightmare.
And Lucy's reaction is so deeply moving because she doesn't try to correct him with facts or logic. She doesn't explain the timeline.
She meets his trauma with pure, overwhelming emotion. She falls to her knees, embraces him, and delivers this impassioned, tearful speech.
She begs him to weep, to let the emotion out if her voice or her hair reminds him of a home he once knew or a loved one he lost.
She offers him unconditional safety. And the doctor, who has been frozen in his 105 North Tower for nearly 2 decades, finally breaks.
The psychological dam bursts.
He collapses under a massive storm of emotion, weeping in the arms of a daughter he never knew existed. The tension in the room is overwhelming.
Laurie, the pragmatic man of business, looks at this shattered, weeping old man and panics. He fears for the doctor's incredibly fragile physical health and suggests they cannot possibly travel.
He thinks the shock of moving him will kill him. But Lucy, showing an immense, sudden strength that belies her fragile appearance, steps up.
She realizes that despite his physical weakness, remaining in Paris is far more dangerous.
Remaining near the shadow of the Bastille and the simmering, violent energy of the Defarge's wine shop, immediate travel to England is the only path to safety.
Defarge, perhaps eager to get the doctor out of the way now that the Jacques have seen him and the political theater is over, agrees.
He quickly arranges a coach under the cover of darkness. The group frantically departs the city, heading for the coast and the relative safety of London, carrying the broken relic of the Bastille with them.
This physical escape concludes the first massive act of the novel, but it sets an undeniable trajectory for everything that follows in books 2 and 3.
On paper, they have won. They have found the doctor, they have physically escaped Paris, and they are heading toward the safety of Tellson's Bank and a quiet life in England.
But Dickens has laid the thematic groundwork brilliantly. The trauma of the Bastille and the looming, inevitable storm of the Bloody Revolution, perfectly represented by the cold, calculating Madame Defarge and her knitting, will act like a gravitational pull.
They may have crossed the channel, but the past cannot simply be outrun in a carriage. The revolution will inevitably pull them back.
Exactly.
What a staggering piece of narrative architecture. Synthesizing everything we pulled from the text today, we started with a massive macro view of 2 struggling nations teetering on the edge of historical collapse.
We rode through the misty, paranoid anxiety of a midnight mail coach, analyzing the nature of institutional secrecy.
We felt the shock of a young woman discovering her entire identity was built on a lie. And we witnessed the horrifying desperation of starving people drinking bloody wine from the mud.
And we ended up in a claustrophobic, dark garret where a broken man, stripped of his very name, is finally reunited with a daughter who holds the power to save him.
This, in all its pain, trauma, and hope, is the absolute essence of being recalled to life.
It is a remarkable achievement in storytelling. And as we conclude this analysis, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over, something that bridges the intimate, personal trauma we just witnessed with the massive historical events looming on the horizon.
I'd love to hear it.
We have just seen, in agonizing detail, how the trauma of 18 years of isolation and arbitrary cruelty completely erased one man's identity, replacing his humanity with a number and a mechanical task.
Right.
But look back at the streets of Saint-Antoine. Look at the thousands of people drinking wine mixed with street mud. If isolation and targeted cruelty can break the mind of one strong, educated doctor, what does generational starvation, systemic degradation, and centuries of arbitrary tyranny do to the collective mind of an entire nation?
Wow.
When the line between humanity and sheer desperate animal survival is entirely erased by the ruling class, what happens when those millions of broken people finally find the strength to push back?
That is a chilling thought, and it perfectly sets the stage for the absolute storm that is about to break in the subsequent chapters. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope this exploration has given you a profound new perspective on how history, psychology, and brilliant storytelling collide. Until our next deep dive, Take care of yourself and keep questioning the world around you.